In this video, I'm going to discuss how to debark your slabs when you get them. They come in all kinds of different ways. Some come with very little bark on them at all, and others come with quite a bit of bark. One of the important things when you're getting ready to do any kind of river type epoxy with the slab, whether it's a table or it's a charcuterie board, and this is going to be a charcuterie board, is to get all this bark off to ensure you have good adhesion to the slab. If you do not, then you may not have good adhesion, and later down the road you may find your epoxy actually separating away from the board, which is never a good day. So let's get on with it and talk about the process. So how clean does the boards have to get? How much bark do you got to get off? Here's some examples. Here's 3 boards that I've done earlier today before I started filming the video. And each of these started with different levels of bark. The first 2 boards here that I'm showing you had just a slight level of bark on there. It didn't require a chisel. I could get started right away with the carving tool you'll see me using. That's this one, and you can see how clean I've got that. Here's another one that I got all cleaned up. And these are both ready to go. And what you'll see is there's no loose bark or debris on those. And then here's another one that's kind of like the board I'm getting ready to show. You can see all the bug holes. This one's been bug infested in the past, so we'll have to make sure we fill those. But more importantly is it had very, very thick bark on here, and it took a little while to get this all off. And I usually start the process with a chisel. If I had a draw knife, I'd be using a draw knife. Depending on how much is left after the chiseling, you'll see me typically go to the carving tool. Then I'll go to a wire wheel if necessary. If the carving tool got most of it off, you won't see me do that at all. And then the next step I'll do is go typically to a sander. I use my Surf Prep because it has a nice flexible interface, small and easy to handle. And what I'm trying to do is trying to get all of the groove marks off that I put in with the grinding wheel. And is that necessary? No, they would be fine. It's just a preference on what I like to do. So let's go ahead and get started. Before I get started in the debarking process, I wanted to go over the tools that I'm going to be using and that others can use. You don't have to use these tools. You can do it any way you want. But here's the tools that I use when I'm doing the debarking, and it makes it go pretty quickly. The first thing I will be using are chisels, and different sizes will work. Doesn't matter. And a hammer, nothing fancy. And through brute force, you'll see me using those to debark the biggest part if it's got real thick bark. If it doesn't have real thick bark, I may not use those. Now, because I'm using chisels and so forth, and I'm making bark fly and other things, there are a couple other things I want to go over first. And that is, I like to wear gloves to help protect me from the chisels and the bark as I'm scraping it. Then the other thing that I always wear is my safety glasses to stop chips from flying into the eyes. And then when I'm actually doing the carving and the debarking with the power tools, I will be wearing a dust mask. And I've been trying this one for the last month or 2, and this is certainly my favorite. It's the RC Mask M3. And I need to do a review on this, but it does a great job. And I don't have the problems with it that I used to have with my other masks, where I would have my glasses fog up, my eyeglasses wouldn't fit in right, my ear protection wouldn't work over them. I've always tried to use different face masks, but none of them have worked out for me, and which means that what do? I either don't wear it right, or I don't wear it at all, which isn't good. So I need to do a review on this because I've certainly adopted this one as my favorite face mask. And when I'm in a situation where I've got dust flying, either at the miter station or doing what I'm going to be doing today, you'll see me wearing this dust mask. I certainly recommend when you're using the power carving tools to wear a dust mask. And then the other one is hearing protection. Those are the safety pieces of equipment: gloves, glasses, dust mask, hearing protection. Let's get back into the other tools. The other are hammers and chisels. And then I like to use angle grinders. And I had 2 of them because they're not that expensive when I bought them. And I also teach for the San Diego Fine Woodworkers, so I like to take them down there with me. And one of them is a power carving tool that works really well with getting the bark off once you get everything chiseled off. Or if you have a light bark, this will work. Sometimes you don't need one this aggressive, but so if you don't need it this aggressive, then I have another angle grinder with a wire wheel on it. And I use this then to pull off the light bark and do the finishing touches on light bark. Now, if you don't have an angle grinder with wire wheels, you can use other tools. You know, you already got the chisels. The other tools you can use are these brushes right here. These are wire brushes that are meant to go on a drill. And those work pretty good also. So you can use these kind of wire brushes, any kind of wire brush. Here's another carving wheel that I have. I have this one, and I have this one if I need to get really aggressive. Doesn't happen very often. I don't need it. And then I have this wire brush also that goes on an angle grinder. In addition to the wire brushes, we just talked about these power wire brushes and so forth. We shouldn't forget there's always manual wire brushes to get into crevices and cracks. Another tool you'll find me using at times is a screwdriver if I'm trying to get into an area where I can't get in with the brushes and pick it out. Or if it's a real small area, I'll even use dental picks. Anything that I can get in, awls, anything I can get into the cracks and crevices, because remember, all bark has to be removed. Anywhere where you're going to have epoxy poured over it or touching it. Then, last but not least, is I like to use my surf prep sander. You can use whatever kind of sander you want. I like the feel of this one. It feels good in my hand. Plus, I really like the sponge interface for the curvatures. And you'll see how I use this sander to take out some of the carving marks if I'm going to put a clear coat over a small tabletop pour to take out some of the ridges that I get from carving. That's your tools. Harbor Freight is nice and cheap, and you can get these directly from RC Mask. So let's move into the actual debarking part of the video. For the next part, this is the board that I'm going to be debarking, and you can see there's very thick bark on this. And so I will be starting out with a chisel and working my way through, and that's what you'll be seeing. A couple things I want to point out of importance is I'm using powerful tools in this, carving tools, and these can really throw up dust. So make sure you're wearing some kind of dust mask. I also run an air cleaner in my ceiling. I have a Supermax air cleaner. I wear my glasses, and the other thing is be ready when you kickstart this power tool. It wants to jump out of your hand, so be very careful that you're well prepared and you're ready to get it started. And when you're using your chisel, try not to over chisel and put it into your leg or something. They can be very sharp. So just a couple thoughts as we move forward. It's probably a good idea to use headphones or ear protection also. I've got this power carving tool, and then on another angle grinder, I have a wire wheel if I decide I need to use it. In the past, I used to always use a wire wheel because I was using a frap wheel with this. But today, I've been using a carving wheel, and I've had no reason to use the wire brush. Instead, I've been using my surf prep sander and 80 grit sandpaper. So that's what you're going to be watching. Again, this is a thicker piece, and if I didn't have all this thick bark, I may not even need to use the chisel. At this point, I'm getting ready to chisel the big parts of bark off before I move on to the grinding wheel. Make sure you've got your chisel under control so you don't hurt yourself. Try not to chisel towards exposed extremities, etc. The other thing is make sure your work is held down in a way that it can't flip up and hit you in the face as you start aggressively attacking this. You'll notice I'm also wearing gloves as I'm working with a sharp chisel, and also the bark can get sharp. So I don't want to get my hands all cut up from the bark. So you even want to get this light initial skin coat of the bark that's right next to the slab. What we don't get with our chisel, we'll get with our carving tool. bark all the way down to the bottom. Okay, now that we've got all the thick bark off, we'll switch over to the power tool, which means I will put on my dust mask, and I'm also going to go turn on the air cleaner for the ceiling, because this is where dust flies. As I'm carving this board with that grinding carving wheel, you can see I get some deep grooves in some of these places. And I could just leave that in there, that's fine. I prefer to not have that in there, so the next step you'll see me doing here is taking out those by using 80 grit sandpaper in my Surf Prep sander. It's got that nice foam interface. I could use a higher grit sandpaper if I had it, but that's the lowest grit I have, 80 grit. Well, that's it for one side. Now we just turn it around and do the other side, and we'll have a board that's fully prepped for making it as a river charcuterie. You may ask, why do I bother to pull out the grooves in there from the one reason I do it is because I haven't decided whether I'm going to put a bottom thin layer like I did in my wine and cheese board. And if I do it that way, I'd like that clear coat not to show a bunch of tool marks here. If your board is going to be filled completely with opaque epoxy, you'll never see them, and it might even be a better grip. It's just my personal choice to take the time, if you're wondering. There it is, nice and clean. As they say under an old saying, as smooth as a baby's bottom. We just finished debarking 4 charcuterie sized boards. They're walnut with bark. And I just wanted to demonstrate how much bark and dust this really throws all over your shop, and therefore the importance of wearing your dust protection for breathing, and also, if at all possible, having an air cleaner in the. So this is the air cleaner I have in my shop. It's a Super Max that I bought a couple years ago, and it does a great job when I turn it on, and these kinds of works, or when I'm kicking up a lot of dust with my CNC, I'll turn that thing on, and it's a nice tool to have. So nice, a clean shop and clean boards. 1, 2, 3, 4 debarked boards ready in inventory to make charcuterie boards. Feeling good. Well, that's it for debarking. It's not a tough job. It's not real hard. It's pretty straightforward and easy to approach. You just have to make sure that you get all the bark off. And once you get all the bark off, you're set. The next step in this river charcuterie process is to do 1 of 2 things depending on what you have available to you. You can either make a form or buy a form. So if you haven't bought a form or made a form already, by the time you're doing this, you'll want to do one or the other. So if you've already got the form, then the next step is to measure out the wood and cut it so that it fits in whatever form you have. If you watch to this point, this is your chance for input. Put it in the comments section. Do you want the next video released to be on how to make a form for making your river charcuterie board? Or do you want to have me talk about how to cut the slab down to the right size and dimensions to fit in whatever form you have? You let me know in the comments section. And then in the next couple days, I'll put something in my community section of my YouTube channel to take a poll. And the ones that are most vocal about what they'd like to see my next video on, that's what I'll do. You make the decision. I thank you for taking time to watch through to this point. If you did, it really helps my YouTube channel when people watch all the way to the end. It doesn't look as good when people check out. Even if you fast forward, getting to the end is the right thing. Also, if you think I deserve it and I'm giving you good content, please give me the old thumbs up signal. And if you haven't subscribed, if you want to be informed of future videos, the other thing that helps is if you will actually subscribe to the channel if you're not already. So there's a subscribe button, and at the end there'll be a subscribe section you can do in my exit screen. With that, have a great day until we meet in this medium again. I hope you're making some dust or pouring some epoxy or doing something fun in your shop. I know I am.